Hello, Jean Cregan in the Faith Formation Office with today's message. So today I'm going to use a little bit of a visual, and that is my jar full of rocks. So this is an old story and you probably know it, but recently I was reminded of it, and last summer Jackie and Matt used it with the Faith Formation students. I'd heard it many years ago, but it's still so applicable to where I am and where I think a lot of us find ourselves at this time of year. The fall's coming and it's time to make our schedules. So there's this famous story of a university professor who brought a jar of rocks into his classroom, just like this. You can see my rocks in my jar, right? So I could fit 4 rocks into my jar. So the university professor asked his students, "Is my jar full?" And the students said, "Well, yes, of course it's full. You can't fit any more of those big rocks in, right? The cover won't go on." So then he picked up a bunch of little rocks that looked like this and said, "Well, what if I put the little rocks in?" And he put the little rocks in, and the little rocks actually, added to the jar. So the students sort of laughed and said, "Yep, now the jar is full." And then the professor said, "Well, what if I grab some sand and put some sand in and added sand to the jar?" And he said to his students, "Now is it full?" And the students were like laughing a little bit, and they said, "Yeah, now it's full." Right? Now I definitely can't even begin to try to put one of the large rocks in it. And the point of his exercise was simply to tell his students that we should fill our jars with the most important things in our lives. What are our big rocks? What go in first? Because if you start with the sand, right, you can't fit the big rocks in. I started with 4 big rocks. I can't fit 4 big rocks into this jar and put the lid on. And even though this jar is twice the size of my first jar, right? If we start with the sand, then there's just no room. I was reminded of this recently because the fall's coming, and whether you're a parent or not, the fall just tends to be a time of new schedules. The summer's over, vacation's over, and we get back to kind of a rhythm of our lives. And the parish life is no different. So last spring, I was talking with a young father who was just talking about how much he had really enjoyed that he and his family had kept a little margin in their schedule last year post-COVID, and they really enjoyed having the less hectic lifestyle. And after having this conversation with him, we were chatting and he said, "Oh, it sounds like you're really back to the craziness." And I was like, you know what? He's right. My schedule last spring was crazy. It wasn't even something that I should expect a person to be able to handle. And I've taught my children day in and day out that God comes first and family comes second and everything else comes third. In the example, God and health and family would be our big rocks, right? And our little rocks would be things like maybe volunteer projects that we do, or work, or hobbies. They're still important. They're part of who we are, but they're not the most important things in our lives. And then the sand can be like everything else. Binge watching a TV show, signing up to be, to bake things for their bake sale because we want to be the perfect mother, or, being the cookie mom for the Girl Scout troop, or volunteering for too many committees because you're newly retired and have all of that time on your hands. But if we fill our jars with sand, we don't have room for the things that are most important. And for me, it just makes me feel not right. As being a parent, I recognize that if my life doesn't reflect what I teach, my kids see right through me. When I was a young teacher, I knew that I couldn't teach what I didn't believe. It caused me to think a lot about my Catholic faith, and parenting is something that has caused me to really step back and say, what do I value and what is important to me? And if I value family and faith above all things, does my day-to-day life show that? I'm proud to say sometimes it does, but I'm equally as maybe not proud to say that there's many times I catch myself and it doesn't. So what's the fall gonna look like? How are we gonna arrange our priorities? How are we gonna fill our time? Is it gonna be sand, or is it gonna be putting the large rocks in first and finding things? We hear a lot about balance. We hear a lot about balance in the self-help world and in the family world and work world, balancing home and I don't think it's about balance. I think it's about intentionality. What are you intentional about? When we intentionally put the right rocks in our jar, our life will show it. What if you intentionally put faith and prayer and family in that jar and let all the little rocks and the sand wait a little bit and add them in where they fit? That's my goal for this fall. And I thought I would share it with you in case it inspires somebody else to kind of follow the same path.